G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and so far a fantastic week. Now I will say this will be my last video for a while. How long? I have absolutely no idea. So this afternoon I go in for an MRI. This is for planning, just to see where do we actually want to make the incision on his head. And they're going to cut off some of this wonderful hair. I finally got my hair how I like it, but let's not worry about that. I'm a man in his late 20s. I'm lucky to have any. And then very early tomorrow morning, I'm in for my brain operation. I'll be in ICU following that for a night or so, they say, and then I'll move into a neuro ward for 2 or 3 nights after. And when I'm back, I don't know how my recovery is going to be. Surgery is hard on anything, but when they're poking and prodding in your brain, it is not super nice. I've gone through this before. Those results from the surgery, they then go on to the oncologist, and then he, working with another team, will determine if I just then do the 12 months of chemo or I do the chemotherapy mixed in with radio as well. So there's still a lot on the cards, and the future at this point, I don't know as much as you guys don't know. And I will let you guys know how everything goes, whether through me or through Lily, probably on the Telegram most likely. So look, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to see you guys again. And look, if you'd like to support me and the channel, as it's my full-time job, it's what I do and I have to take time off and there's no such thing as sick leave here, there are some links below if you'd like to support me. But look, as always, what have we got? I reckon we could start a chant. What do we want? Updates. What have we got? A lot. We have a lot to go over. So look, I'm going to do the bit I missed yesterday on desertion out of the Russian armed forces and the Ukrainian armed forces. We need to look at the maps. Now on the maps, we're going to look at some geolocations, but there are some very large movements shown by Syriac today in multiple directions where it looks like the line has really collapsed and there is kilometers of advance in areas that have been heavily defended and fortified. So that is concerning yet very interesting. So we'll look at exactly what is happening there and some movements in Kursk, east, south, everywhere. We need to look at what Zelensky has said about peace deals as well as for energy strikes and how that may look between Ukraine and Russia. We also need to look at what the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has taken a shot at the United Nations. We'll talk about that. But where I want to start is North Korea. As this has been absolutely, if I just go on a incognito tab and just type in Ukraine, the first thing that comes up is just North Korea troops, blah, 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 this. So look, where I stand on this, so far there has been no evidence yet that North Korean troops are taking part in the war in Ukraine. Regardless of what people say online about there's already been desertions somehow, the 6,600 kilometres from Vladivostok, where we know there was footage of them, regardless of what people say about there's been 18 to 20 already killed, regardless of the Asian bloke who they say was North Korean but was speaking Ukrainian that got shared around. I don't know how many North Korean people would speak Ukrainian, probably very few. But what I'm getting here is there has been very little, if not no evidence. No, so far I've seen zero evidence that North Koreans are taking part in hostilities in Ukraine. But what I want to say here is it is, in my opinion, that it is in Ukraine's best interest to promote the idea that these North Korean soldiers are going to join the war. I think strategically that Ukraine wants North Koreans to be involved in this war, whether they can sell the narrative through all the channels through the mainstream media, which don't push back on anything, or if North Koreans actually become involved in the war, then the photos and videos of this. Why do I think that Ukraine can actually benefit from this? Okay, we're going to go over everything in a sec, but 12,000 North Korean troops with zero combat experience is not enough to make a substantial change for the Russian forces. It's a few percent compared to the tens, hundreds, to potentially millions of soldiers that could be called up. But this is where I think it will make a big strategic difference. The Ukrainian ambassador and former chief of the armed forces, Valery Zaluzhny, he has stated this week, we lost the way to independently bring an end to this war. Now, I don't want to misquote him there, so I've got this exactly up that was said at his speech this week. Because I believe back in 23, we lost the opportunity to independently bring this war to an end. Speaking about the failed 2023 counter-offensive. So independently end the war. And I agree. I think Ukraine has lost the ability to independently bring an end to the war. I think at the end of 22 into 23, if there was mobilisation in the first weeks, as well as a massive amount of commitment from Western states to train and arm those guys, there was real opportunity there that then got missed. And I think we'll look back on that as well down the future. But I agree that for Ukraine to have a victory, that being their original stated goals, 91 borders, in line with the 10-point peace plan, Ukraine would need direct external influence. There are two ways that I could see this happening. Firstly, showing that a third party, in this case North Korea, has entered. Therefore, a Western third party should enter. That's how it would say, well, they have come in, you should enter. We're going to look at what Estonia and South Korea have said today, as well as what Zelensky has said. And the second way I see that this could occur is, like I have been saying over the past months, the risk of a false flag attack then draws in external powers. But I believe the reason we see Ukraine talking so much about this isn't that there's going to be some huge change on the front line from these troops, but there may be an even larger change and larger influence from then South Korea, EU states, whoever, to come into the war. That is what I believe that Ukraine is hoping when we see the UK ambassador Zaluzny saying that Ukraine has lost the way to independently bring an end to the war. So why do I have this? Well, let's go over everything that has come out in the past few days. Now, head of the GUR, Budanov, who I'm sure you are familiar with. Now, there are rumours that Budanov is going to be then replaced. Again, we've seen Zelensky push back on this. We don't know. But in an interview with The War Zone today, that North Korean troops are expected to arrive in Kursk region tomorrow to help defend it against Ukraine's ongoing incursion. The head of Ukrainian Defence Intelligence, GUR, of course, Budanov, he said, "We are waiting for the first units tomorrow in the Kursk direction. It is unclear at the moment how many or how they will be equipped. We will see after a couple of days." Now, this is an important aspect, and I said this. I think if we see a North Korean deployment, which I'm still not 100% that we will see this, I don't know. At this point, it doesn't seem like Russia needs another 12,000 troops. But regardless, they have partners with North Korea, and North Korea will be looking for experience. But operations in Kursk, whether you like it or not, will be seen to by the international leaders as very different than deployment of a third party like North Korea into occupied areas. Whether you like it or not, whether you agree with that or disagree, I think it's objectively true that leaders around the world, international states, will see it as different. And this is exactly how the Storm Shadow or ATACMS are seen. They can be used within occupied areas, but in Russian territory, they are not to be used. So in a weird way, if you do some mental gymnastics, it is similar to this. This is why I've said I think we could look back on Kursk as the biggest military mistake of the 21st century. We've seen it exponentially increase ground that Russia can push in the east, and it may have actually opened up Ukraine to the possibility of a third party then on that territory that is Russian territory that is being occupied there. If that makes sense. It would be like if there was a deployment of Western troops into Ukraine, which I agree would be the equivalent of this. It would be vastly different if they were working on occupied territory than if they were to choose to cross the border back into Russia. So I believe the Kursk thing, the Kursk aspect of this, is a very, very important part that world leaders would be looking at. Let's continue here. There is a possibility that personnel, this is talking about South Korea, the personnel will be sent to Ukraine to monitor the tactics and combat capabilities of North Korean special forces dispatched in support of Russia. So get away from the titles people are saying of South Korean combat troops in tanks and this and that. No, that is not true. Monitor the tactics and combat capabilities of North Korean forces. If deployed, the team is expected to be composed of military personnel from intel units who can analyse North Korean battlefield tactics or take part in interrogations of captured North Koreans. Like I said in the beginning, not many Ukrainians are going to speak Korean. Therefore, they'll be there as translators as well. Now, in this as well, remember the translation, we see things like this. In addition to ground troops, North Korea sent pilots to fly Russian planes in the war against Ukraine from Newsweek, and Europe is not reacting at all. So let's think about this for a while, and this is what Fighter Bomber has said back. Regarding North Korean pilots who flew to Russia, my comment is as follows. If this is not bullshit, as usual, then they arrive at retraining on equipment because the DPRK North Korea, with aviation, not only everything is bad, but it's a complete mess. It is, people, I've actually heard it say that North Korean Air Force is actually an incredible, aviation museum history. Like the planes that are there, there's actually very few surviving of that type, but they're all very old. And there's a lot of fuel issues in North Korea, so they can only fly for, it's like 15 to 25 hours a year, which is substantially less than other nations with fighter aircraft. Taking into account the claiming next year, they've been declared Year of Assistance to our foreign friends, including the latest aviation equipment. This is a completely normal decision. So the alliance built there to try and increase North Korea's capability. This, of course, is seen as a huge problem by South Korea. That's why they want to monitor this. I'm too lazy to comment on what nonsense about the lack of pilots, but we have to. We have a shitload of pilots, by we saying Russia. A few experienced ones and a lot of young people. But in a spherical vacuum, there is not a lot of them. So they are saying we have a heap of pilots, we've got some experience, we have some non-experience, like that Su-34 that went down last week, probably because of inexperienced pilots and problems. That's what Fighter Bomb sort of said in this. Therefore, there will be no help from the Koreans, who do not communicate with anyone without an interpreter, have no experience in combat sorties at all, and will not gain it in 5 days of training on the ground. In the sky there will be no help. A complete loss of valuable aircraft and engine resources. Yes, again, they will need an interpreter. And they're not going to be in the back seat of the plane interpreting everything going, as well as it'll be easier just to train someone from day dot. One of the biggest problems, if not the biggest problem for the F-16 training, was actually the language barrier, not exactly the skills in the aircraft too. I don't see why this would make sense other than just trying to increase the capability of the North Korean force, but to then get in the bloody hot seat of a Russian jet, realistically, you're going to have valuable losses of aircraft where Russia is in a war at the moment. So let's speak more on what the South Koreans have said about this and what Zelensky and I believe the Estonians or Lithuanians said also. South Korea vowed Tuesday to take phased measures against North Korea, urged North Korea to immediately withdraw troops from Russia. Of the 12,000 troops, 1,500 deployed to Russia's far east. That's all we've seen them so far. He said this is a significant security threat to both South Korea and the international community for blatant violations of UN Security Council resolutions prohibiting military cooperation with North Korea. So the UN does have resolutions that you can't do military cooperation with North Korea. Again, I think all of that from the UN has really been chucked out the window with events we've seen over the past couple of years. We're going to talk about the UN and what Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has said also. The government calls for immediate withdrawal of North Korean troops. Deputy Security Advisor Tim Thankyou in a briefing. Again, what South Korea don't want is North Korean troops getting more experience, more training, and potentially more weapons, because that it would never balance the power between South and North Korea. It's just way too poor in North Korea, and South Korea is such a military powerhouse. But again, if there is some alliance built and North Korea gets some sort of modern like ICBM, well, that is a huge international problem. Zelensky talked about this yesterday with, well, we don't know what's going back to Pyongyang. And that is what I've said. I've said the escalation that the US is worried about is not Russia dropping X bomb on this target in Ukraine. I don't believe it is that at all. I believe the escalation that the US is worried about is Russia has built incredibly strong friendships and growing friendships with China, Iran, North Korea. China is after some tech. Of course, there is some tech thereafter, deliverable nuclear systems. They want 1,000 by the end of the decade, anti-submarine capability, and jet engines. And of course, for China, Russia fixes some problems of ports and grain and other pieces. But let's talk about the other two, Iran and North Korea, rogue states, who are desperate for then some level of game-changing weapon. Now, we've said there are no game-changing weapons. That is a lie. There is a game-changing weapon. It's nuclear bombs. That is a Wunderwaffen. Now, it can't be used tactically. There is no such thing, in my opinion, as a tactical weapon. It's all strategic, a nuclear bomb, whether it's a backpack through to ICBM, it is strategic how it changes. But, of course, that levels everything. Does that make sense? If that were to go in the hands of Iran and North Korea, it changes the peninsula or it changes the Middle East dramatically. If the illegal military cooperation with North Korea and Russia continues, South Korea will not stand by, but respond firmly in collaboration with the international community. So these phased measures in response to the level of military ties. Among possible scenarios include sending weapons for defence and attack as senior. For sending weapons for defence and attack from the presidential office. South Korea indicated the possibility of supplying weapons to Ukraine after North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Putin signed a pact pledging mutual defence. This is the thing I said about Kursk. That pact is mutual defence. Forget what's happening for the Russian invasion occupation in the east and south of Ukraine. If you take the Kursk thing, North Korea can sell this as well. It's mutual defence. That's where I think that Kursk offensive opened up the opportunity for this. Now, South Korea is a weapons and armoured vehicle absolute bloody powerhouse. The Germans, particularly Rheinmetall, are very concerned about the growing influence that the South Koreans have. Now, sadly, I'm not going to make a video tomorrow, but I'll be very interested to see if Budanov is correct and we see the North Koreans on the ground tomorrow. Now, this comes from Lithuania. North Korean troops claims revive talk of EU boots on the ground. Lithuania's Foreign Minister Gabrielius, I won't try and pronounce that, sorry mate, said that it's time for European countries to revisit French President Emmanuel Macron's idea of deploying troops to Ukraine. Since Macron said that, he's been very quiet about it. If information about Russia's killing squads being equipped with North Korean ammunition and military personnel is confirmed, we'll get back to boots on the ground and other ideas proposed by Macron. Exactly goes into the very first thing I said about using this as a way to 12,000 troops isn't going to make that much change for Russia, but it could make a huge change for Ukraine. I think Ukraine has more to benefit from if there is a North Korean deployment than Russia. If the West do anything, remember, Lithuania is not the one going to be making the decision on this. It is going to be the US, and I don't think the US is going to judge on boots on the ground, even if there's a large deployment of North Korean forces, particularly into Kursk, and I still believe probably into occupied areas potentially too. But let's look at what Zelensky has said. In particular, we have information that 2 units of military personnel from North Korea are being trained, potentially even 2 brigades of 6,000 people each. This is a challenge. We know how to respond to this challenge. It is important that our partners do not shy away from the challenge at all. Remember, important that our partners don't shy away. If North Korea can intervene in a war in Europe, then the pressure on this regime is definitely not strong enough. You need to put more pressure on North Korea. And if Russia is still able to expand and prolong this war, it means that everyone in the world who is still not helping to force Russia into peace is actually helping Putin to wage war. So if you're one of these countries that is not actively behind Ukraine, forcing Russia, then you then are helping Putin. Aggressors must be stopped. We expect a firm, concrete response from the world. Hopefully not only in word. So again, this is why I'm saying you can sell that to gain more support. I think it would be really helpful for Ukraine if there was that, or at least, even if there isn't, the ability to sell that too. Will we see North Korean troops on the ground or not? I don't know. You will find out sooner than I. I'll be doing one of these ones with the bloody thing in my arm from the anaesthetist. That sounded wrong, didn't it? It sounded like I was doing crack. Now, anyway, let's have a look at the maps here. Of course, we have Ukraine, the center, the capital of Kyiv. The red area is occupied since 22, the purple since 2014. The red check ground that Russia has made in the last 24 hours. The blue and green within Ukraine's borders. Of course, area where Russia has been at some point. The blue back into Russia is area that Ukraine is occupying back into Russia. Now, I'm going to give a quick refresh on this because, no, this map has not updated today. So be interested to see what is or is not shown tomorrow. Let's turn that off because there's no changes here. Now, where I want to come straight off the bat is I want to talk about Chasiv Yar. So, of course, we have Bakhmut, and then the west of Bakhmut is Chasiv Yar. Now, we know this map is already behind. Let's have a look at another Ukrainian source here of Noel reports. Now, what he shows down here is in and around Adrivka that there is a Russian advancement out from Klishkivka. But he is showing also that from Klishkivka to the canal here is being occupied by the Russian forces. A fact somewhere in the vicinity of 3.5 k's difference, but also up around Ivanovsky, this road further out, more filling in. He's showing this updated the other day on this map. So sort of catching up there. But where I want to go is to Suryak maps. Now, Suryak is very reliable, and many times I've seen him step back on claims, hey, that was incorrect, and fix it up on the map. This shows significant differences in here in Chasiv Yar. So just to give you an idea of where we are looking, because lining up these maps I get can be a little bit difficult for you. If you're looking at this and go, Willie, shut up, sorry. But let's zoom in one more. So look at these blocks right here. These is where, let's say, the Russians have moved beyond these blocks in here, as well as to then the west of Kalinivka as well, coming up right on the outskirts of the really central part of Chasiv Yar. This is a large advancement given how fortified and how heavily defended this specific area is. Suryak says, the Russian army broke the first defences of Chasiv Yar. During 1 week, the Russian forces achieved important advances in the city. After taking the first hills west of Kalinivka, this up the top here, the locality came under Russian control, and it was possible to advance through the forest, capturing Druzhba, children's camp, and later the system of trenches adjacent to this pond. At the same time, during 6 days, Russian troops managed to take control of the Novi district and almost all of this district. So I just want to show you another area where the Russians advanced by Suryak at least the most. Remember, we wait on other confirmations, but see this like pond right here? This is this pond here. So depending where you want to measure from, maybe a kilometer. I don't know why this doesn't work like that anymore. Or straight from here, maybe about 1.59 kilometers, so a mile. So that is a large advancement, particularly in this area. Now, 10 meters in Chasiv Yar is probably a harder fight than 10 kilometers in other areas. Remember, KVK is not relevant depending on the area, and Chasiv Yar really flattens out the territory here between Chasiv Yar and Bakhmut is very hilly. It starts flattening out, and then Konstantinivka, Kramatorsk, and Ruskalivka, these areas do come under threat if Chasiv Yar was to come under control. This is a large issue. It could be said the Russian army controls 30% of Chasiv Yar. However, there are still pockets of resistance in some basements and houses. Meanwhile, Ukrainian army continues to entrench itself in the city centre and the forest full of trenches and bunkers. Looking at the trend, we are witnessing an encircling movement of the city from the north and south that will put the Ukrainian forces in a situation similar to the one their soldiers are facing at Seledova, that envelopment. However, significant resistance is expected due to the strategic importance of the city being located on high ground. Losing Chasiv Yar means leaving Konstantinivka exposed, and therefore Toretsk and south and Kramatorsk in the north. Those areas we spoke about. Of course, Toretsk down here, Konstantinivka, this creates a large issue and says that the Russians are going for some level of envelopment there. Now, where I want to come next is another large advancement that Suryak is saying around this Vezhnevi and Rivka front. So let's have a look at this right here. Now, this is, I don't know, I struggle to see the difference between yellow here, but let's get an idea. So if we come in just one, no, we'll go back out one, sorry. So this blue dot is Lozova, okay? This red dot is Vezhnevi, and then we have Andreevka in here. So see these two paddocks? This is, or going on. These are these two paddocks here. So it said that the front line is basically coming up the border here between Lugansk and Kharkiv. And then it comes across basically sort of on the borderline through here just to the east of Lozova. So let's have a look. So if this is to be understood somewhere like this, so say about 3.5 kilometers, and then all the way up into around about where this Novoselivsky is too. So that is a hell of an advancement if that is true. Russian army made significant advances on the west bank of Zedabets, expanding the buffer zone between the localities of Andriivka, like we said, and Stelmakivka, entering Kharkiv Oblast and a new axis towards Lozova. Now, what made this possible? Well, this in Pishani. Again, we've spoken about the importance of this Pishani front. This is cut off at the Oskil. You've got a north-south element. I want to drag myself down a little bit. Sorry. Let's get rid of this. To get supplies into this front, where it is said to have large changes today, the logistics supply was made incredibly more difficult coming from the hub of Kupiansk or anywhere in here from Izum down. This was then cut off. That is the importance of this, and I wouldn't be surprised if we have seen these large changes like we have seen increased attacks against Kupiansk. So again, any large changes like that, we need to take with a grain of salt because multiple maps aren't showing it, nor are geolocations. I'll show you some geolocations in a second. But said to be very large changes here. Now, somewhere I do want to show you is then Nevsky, Terny. Now, let's have a look at this. Now, Syriac does have an update just here. Now, this red dot, if you can see, this is Nevsky. Now, what he's showing is there was a Russian advancement. See this Zedabets right here? It sort of is dammed. It comes out like on almost a right angle. This is just here. So he's showing you that this is filled in from Nevsky down to the south. See where this crossing is, this bridge, I guess it's a bridge or a dam wall right here, that he's basically showing that this has been under control down through close enough to that, which is a significant advancement. Now, this map doesn't show this today, but there is an interesting piece in this. So let's say that that has been made or not, doesn't really matter. But what we are seeing is that would then create a problem for supply in areas like Terny and for other soldier supply that is happening in here. Then we see today that Russians are dropping these FABs. Now, I don't know what these are. These are, to me, look like Airburst 250s, 4 of them. That's what I presume it is for Su-34 carrying 4 250s. But regardless, let's look at where those landed. And this is telling. So Terny, we're just about here where my cursor is. So I believe if the Russians have cut this off in here, like Syriac is claiming, that's why we're seeing an increase in the FAB, the FABs, landing around Terny. But again, we will wait and see. Now let's come down into Seledove, and I have some footage to show you. Anyway, so this is Seledove in here. Now this map shows very different to what Syriac is saying. Syriac, remember, he is saying that near Veshnevi here, Veshnevi Mark II, and here is under, this is under sort of occupation, this area where these road supply lines are cut. And this area, the Russians aren't there yet, but he's saying that it is under fire control. So basically strategic cutoff if you're under fire control. That's what he's saying. This map isn't showing anywhere close to this. But we do know there has definitely been some changes in here. So let's have a look today. So Syriac is showing just under where the mine is in here that there is a Russian advancement. Noel reports, he is showing too. Again, this is a little bit more difficult to show, but as well, this is where the mine is. He's showing a Russian advancement in the eastern side of Seledove as well. So definitely we know, I'm going with Noel and the mix of Syriac, I'll say that yes, there has been a central advancement there. Then we have coming through Ukrainian pages, this is where we get the footage of geolocations where we know this has been hit. Now, I can't show you too much of this footage, but it'll be on the Telegram if you'd like to see it. So this is then Russian forces being targeted by and seen by Ukrainian drones. Now we can see this area right here, fairly like these parallel like shed buildings here. Then we find this on the map. This is just here. So just below this mine sitting right in here. So we know there are Russian forces present in there, and they were getting then targeted by Ukrainian drones. But we can say that they were definitely there. If they're still there, we don't know. Now, further footage here we see from another Ukrainian drone above Seledove, and then further we see more targeting and movement of Russian forces in here. Look for the geolocation, right? Seledove, we see where this road turns out, right where my cursor is, right in here. Again, lining up with what Syriac and Noel reports are telling us. So, some level of presence, and it looks, because it's drones and not like firefights, by the footage we can see, looks to be occupation in their area. So Seledove is getting squeezed, and this is a very, very important area. Now, Let's move down to the south of here in Konstantinivka. So Vuhledar, Vodiane, we have Konstantinivka, Antonivka. I put this all as sort of the Vuhledar front, but of course the pressure from Maximalinivka is having more concern on this front too, as it is from that like sort of large scale pincer maneuver, but that pincer has started closing with the fall of Vodiane and Vuhledar as well. So we have ISW map. He shows some changes in from Konstantinivka. This is Antonivka. So he's showing that this in here has been filled in, as well as Konstantinivka on the northern side. Remember, ISW is very conservative towards any Russian gains. So that, I'll say, has been then filled in. But we have a little bit of footage I want to show you just after this map. So this is then, let's zoom out one, Katanivka. That we see here into the first houses of Antonivka. So on the other side here, he's showing, Surek, sorry, the Russians have started in these first houses and further through Katanivka as well. So much further than the other maps are showing us. Now, what we can see here, where this is from, is geolocation, Antonivka. So right about here, where my cursor is, right about there, close enough, we see then Russian infantry conducting assaults through these areas. We see them jumping fences, throwing grenades in buildings and clearing bunkers. Again, you can go and watch that footage on the Telegram using that. Again, I don't share footage if it is not what I believe is strategically or geolocatively, that's a word, important. So we can see definite advancement on that side. Well, at least it's definitely not in grey zone. Grey zone probably should be very expanded in a lot of areas. Now, I actually spoke to you while I was here. This Maximalinivka is sort of one prong of that large-scale pincer. Now we have ISW here showing that Maximalinivka out to even the western side is then being moved by the Russian forces as well on this Vovcha River running through here. So I believe all of this is probably under occupation at this point. If it's not, I don't know how the troops are going to get out of here due by where this expanding on the western side is being shown by ISW. Remember, other maps are showing that has already come under control. Now, let's move up into Toretsk, work our way through New York, Nepalivkia front. Remember, these show largely different in here, but let's move up. During the last hours, Russian Army made new advances inside of here. Now, we need to look at where this actually is, shows dramatically different. So the dogleg in the road, this is then said dogleg. You can see where this then turns back. That might actually be a train line on this map, but said that the Russian forces are past Leonidivka by this red dot and working there into Sherbinivka in here. Again, showing vastly different map to map. So let's just do real rough, somewhere in the vicinity of 3.5 kilometers. But again, grain of salt on everything. Let's come up into Kursk. Now, of course, we saw that M1, M2 and M1 Bradley and Abrams working yesterday right and around this area here, which is confirming where the Russian advancement was in here. I actually saw Ukraine's Ministry of Defense share that footage and people went, yeah, but it's confirming that you lost a lot of ground in here. I saw people pushing back on that being posted. Regardless, let's have a look at what Noel reports has said. According to several sources, Ukrainian units have conducted counterattacks in this area, which is just to the south of here, in Kursk region, and encircled a group of Russian forces that has likely overstretched their attacks. So this is the area right here. The labeling won't zoom in, but right in here, saying that a group of Russian forces is getting surrounded. I've seen then on Russian pages them saying that they are targeting and increase their control in here as well after that initial counter-attack. Again, Kursk is so hard to know because it's so liquid, and presence and occupation or liberation, however you want to say it, in Kursk is very difficult to get an idea of because of that liquidity, because it's not like a built-up fortification like it just is that grind in other areas. Let's then look at the ISW and what he has said in here. He, they, she, X, furry, I don't know. Sorry, I can't just say he anymore. Someone get offended. So let's have a look. So what they're showing, and this came out, I believe this one was 6 minutes since I made this video, so it's the most recent map of all of these, is still showing that the Russians are well past Lyubimovka, that the Ukrainians are still in Novovokhovka, in here, and that they are pushing a hell of a lot closer down into this Loknaya as well. So right down in about where my cursor is here, if we take where this tree line or reservoir, I think reservoir is, that the Russians are still pushing down here. Remember, ISW is very conservative towards any Russian gain, but they're also saying that a geolocated footage posted in October 21 indicates Russian forces advanced south of this Sheptikovka as well. Again, in this bloody thing, it's so hard to get any idea, but Sheptikovka in here, so advanced south of here, but exactly where, again, hard to bloody know. But he's not talking about any changes in and around this front. So again, wait and see, and we'll get a better idea of what is occurring. Now, let's talk about this. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Ukraine posted this on their official Twitter. The UN Secretary General declined Ukraine's invitation to the first Global Peace Summit in Switzerland. He did, however, accept the invitation to Kazan from war criminal Putin. This is a wrong choice that does not advance the cause of peace. It only damages the UN's reputation. Now, at this point, I don't know if the UN's reputation can take any more damage. I don't know if anyone on either side of any spectrum really sees the UN has a reputation. But let's talk about this. The UN Secretary General didn't go to their first Global Peace Summit in Switzerland. Okay, let's look at what he has actually said then from this article back at the time. A UN spokesman said, "I think we've said that the UN will be represented at the appropriate level and all parties organising the summit have been informed. That there have been some notable snubs, which we do know the most important countries, other than the US and Ukraine, they are two of the most important countries, but then the other most important countries for a peace summit didn't attend. Saudi Arabia, we know, who has been the mediator for a lot of the POW changes, both of foreigners and then Ukrainians and Russians. The White House, Harris attended instead of Biden, so Biden missed the event. Russia wasn't invited. India didn't send Modi. They sent a senior diplomat, I can't remember who it was. And China didn't attend also. So the UN's not the only one who didn't send their top diplomat. A lot of people didn't send their top diplomats. Australia, I don't think that Albanese attended. I think we sent the environmental minister or something, but regardless. But I will say that these BRICS, this is very important. The UN absolutely need to attend BRICS. Whether he should have attended that, he probably should have. But what I'm saying is a lot of senior diplomats, like the most seniors, didn't either, because a lot of people didn't see it as a peace summit. It saw it as an effort to get more weapons. If China, Russia, and the most senior from India wasn't attending, or Saudi, people said it was going to fall flat. But BRICS, at the end of the day, represents about 45%, but is going to grow to over 50% of the world's population. The UN, regardless of who invites them, needs to attend something that it represents the economic power of around 50% of the world. Is it in good taste or not? It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the UN need to be looking very, very, very large scale, and the competition that BRICS puts on other economies and dependence on dollars and financial systems around the world also. Remember, BRICS is not a defensive or offensive military alliance. It is neither. It is an economic alliance, but it does challenge other economic alliances or domestic economies around the world. Western. Russia is putting an end to area attack. Russia putting an end to area attacks on Ukrainian energy targets and cargo ships could pave the way for negotiations to end the war, said by Zelensky in an interview with journalists. That this is being reported from then the Financial Times. He said to journalists on Monday, "When it comes to energy and freedom of navigation, getting a result on these points would be a signal that Russia may be ready to end the war." Ukraine is bracing for a painful winter after a series of Russian missile strikes on thermal power plants destroyed almost half of its energy generation. I think very likely, very soon, we'll see a much larger attack coming on the remaining parts of that to give a bit of a blow before winter. Okay. If Moscow and Kyiv agreed to end strikes on their respective energy infrastructures, it would be a significant step towards de-escalating the conflict, Zelensky said in a reference to Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian oil refineries. "We saw during the first peace summit that there could be a decision on energy sector. In other words, we do not attack their energy infrastructure and they don't attack ours. This could lead to the end of the war's hot phase. I think so. That said, the attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure we've seen have a huge effect on Ukraine itself, psychology, and that, of course, the psychological aspect then, of course, affects the morale. It affects people wanting to sign up to fight, and, of course, has a huge effect on people leaving then into Europe as refugees exiting the country. The attacks against Russian oil refineries and facilities hasn't had a equivalent issue on the Russian economy. Has it made issues? Has it made things difficult? Absolutely. Has it cost Russia billions? Absolutely. Has it had large percent of increase of oil exports then decreased? Yes, also. But has it had the same effect? Is it like an eye for an eye there? Absolutely not. Again, in this, my question with everything is why? Why would Russia agree to this at this point heading into winter when it's going to affect you more than us? Why then would Russia accept the terms of that victory plan when they are having successes on the battlefield? These are questions which is somehow like taboo to ask. And if you ask these questions, even if it's from an objective standpoint and with good meaning in your heart, you just want to know the answer, somehow you're seen as like a Putin sympathizer. Like the question of why would Russia negotiate right now when Ukraine's about to head into this winter? Russia has in every aspect on the front line, from man, artillery, the EW, even drones. What else? Basically every factor has numerical advantage in that and is making ground. Why would they negotiate at this point on your terms? People talk about Kursk. I saw an article in this about Kursk. Kursk at the moment is between 500 and 600 square kilometres. Russia's occupying, and I agree, they're occupying like 110,000 square kilometres. Negotiating table there. The square meterage of Kursk, square kilometres, are not as important as anywhere in Sevastopol or Crimea. So even a one-to-one swap of 600 to 600 square kilometres, which is shrinking every day, seen by Western maps, it's not going to be a huge talking point for that exchange of land at a negotiating table. Russia's not going to swap 500 square kilometres of Kursk for 110,000 they're occupying Donetsk and Crimea. It's just not going to happen. So it's rightful to answer why. In this, we don't know exactly how much effect on oil that has had effect in Russia, but I think it's less than the effect that Russia has had on Ukraine's energy grid. Although Russia may be open to it. Now, this video is going long because I'm not going to see you for a while. So let's talk then about desertion. Why Ukraine's army is facing a desertion crisis. Remember, this is a problem. But like my guy said, he believes everything starts and stops with fortifications. He said if you've got good fortifications, less guys die, less guys get injured, they feel like they can defend somewhere. Therefore, they use less ammo, and less people dying means you're going to have better recruitment. You're going to have guys staying around longer because they haven't died or injured, so you're going to have more guys on the front line. Your morale's going to be better for recruitment, and you're going to use, of course, less ammunition. He said it all starts and stops there. Less people to desert. Like he said, if guys have fortifications, defensive positions that they feel that they can defend. But of course, the opposite to this is the butterfly effect in the positive also has a butterfly effect in the negative. As things get worse, things get worse. It's like mortgage. It can be little by little, then all at once. Once things get worse, it can actually get worse rapidly. So let's have a look. More Ukrainian soldiers have deserted the army this year than ever since the onset of a war that analysts say has seen both sides make gains and report losses. Prosecutions for desertion from Ukraine's army are thought to have hit at least 30,000, quite possibly much more, already this year. This is several times higher than the numbers in 2022, the year the war began, when citizens and foreigners voluntarily poured into the military to push Russia back, when motivation was very high. Those found guilty are given between 5 and 12 years in prison. However, some defectors say that it is a better option than facing what might be an endless, undefined period on the battlefield. It's something we've talked about. There's no demobilisation, no end in sight. Guys will say at least that, and I won't be there. Desertion has become so common that Ukraine's parliament, the Verkhovna Rada, took unprecedented step of decriminalising first-time attempts to flee the army on August 20th, as long as those caught agree to return to duty. This links into this. Some will go, I'd rather do that 5 to 12 years. How many have deserted the Ukrainian army? According to the Kyiv Post, it's believed that about 60,000 people have been facing criminal charges for fleeing their posts since the war started. However, the British Daily, The Times, also cited figures from the Prosecutor General, which said showed some 51,000 criminal cases were initiated for desertion and abandonment of military between January and September this year. So still not that long of a time. El País newspaper cited a closer figure to 45,500 between January and August this year, which it said was data from the Prosecutor General's office, which had been leaked to the Ukrainian press. That is a hell of a lot. All these figures are much higher than the 22,000 criminal charges filed for the same offence in 23 and 9,000 cases in 22. It's a hell of a lot more. And it potentially is significantly more. Again, a lot of this could be, if it's only illegal after the first time and you've returned, again, see where that can be much larger. It is unclear if those fleeing the army are mostly conscripts. Again, like we've spoken about, there's no demobilisation for conscripts or even rotation. Or if some who earlier volunteered are also abandoning their posts. Volunteers who are not Ukrainian are allowed to withdraw from the army after 6 months of fighting. So if you go as a foreign fighter, you can withdraw after that. That's where a lot of guys left, because they said, well, look, no, I'm volunteering to be here, risking my life. I should be able to come and go sort of as I wish. So a lot of guys actually left on that. A lot of guys had to go see lawyers and stuff as well. I've interview somewhere that I can only post if the worst happens, but speaks on this. However, Ukrainian conscripts, that is, those mandated to join the fighting by a general mobilisation law that has been enforced since 22, conscription is for life. There is no time limit placed onto it. So when this came out, I showed you all the comments under it. We translated all the comments. Some are probably bots, but others are real. You can't just say everything's a bot that you don't agree with. That there's the only way then out of this is to be killed or wounded, that it is open-ended. Why are so many soldiers deserting? Low morale caused by exhaustion is the main reason. Again, goes into the butterfly effect. My friend spoke of that. Starts with fortifications. Soldiers complaining of having to grind through for days on end under heavy fire without a pause because there is no one to relieve them. Troops are allowed to take 10 days off twice a year, but manpower shortages sometimes delay those vacations. One soldier placed under investigation for desertion, who is also a journalist, told the Times newspaper in the UK, at least in prison, you know when you'll be able to leave. I do think Ukraine could have more success if they put in then demobilisation or rotation laws that were held to as well. Ukraine is facing a manpower crisis, although NATO is not there willing to fix it, which they could. The amount of people in NATO could actually fix that manpower crisis like that. Unwilling to. Could have done it 2.5 years ago, wouldn't be in the situation. What condition is the army in? Sorry, actually, I want to go on something else there. I actually think further down the line, we're going to see audiences start going, well, why are you not fighting? If there's a manpower issue, why aren't you fighting? You're signing up. You've committed everything to, countering Russian disinformation or helping the Ukrainian forces. What the Ukrainian forces need right now is not you on posting on Twitter. The government should, the Americans or the Brits should give this. They need men. That is the thing. How willing are you? Are you willing to walk the walk or talk the talk? It is not clear how many men Ukraine has lost in the war, but analysts say they might be in the tens of thousands. Western estimates put it at 80,000 soldiers. Experts say the rising number of desertion cases comes as Ukraine faces a shortage of soldiers on the battlefield. As few as 5 to 7 Ukrainian soldiers are having to face some 30 soldiers from the Russian side in some cases. Analysts estimate there are about 1 million military personnel in the Ukrainian army compared to the 2.4 million on the Russian side, but neither country publishes those figures. Ukrainian army commanders put the ratio of Russians versus Ukrainian combatants at 10-1. So yeah, you might see it here. Well, it's double and a half, but that a lot of people saying there's a problem for actual combatants. So there is much more troops on the Ukrainian side who aren't actually direct combat soldiers compared to the Russians. But what we see in this, and this is something you can look through History Legends video, speaking about who's winning the attritional war. So what we're seeing in here is that Russians have 5 to 7 times the soldiers. So 5 to 7 Ukrainian soldiers having to face up to 30 soldiers from the Russian side. We see the personnel differences here, yet what we are told is that the Ukrainians inflict 3 to 20 times the losses on the Russians. That's what we're getting told. 3 needs to be just to break even. That just needs to be neutral. We've heard that 20 times. Remember, we've been told by officials, as Zhuluzny last week, quoted again, that 30,000 figure. We're getting, if you look through the liquidated personnel on the Ukraine defence page, it's saying that there's 600,000 Russians killed, what would translate into about 2 million that are then wounded. Again, with artillery being the main weapon system that is causing KIA, on the battlefield, these numbers start asking some questions. And asking those questions does not mean you're out there singing Katusha with a fucking red, blue, and white striped flag on your face. It means you're asking legitimate questions to try and know the truth. What was the good quote I heard yesterday? The truth does not change according to our ability to stomach it. Manpower and weaponry problems are also putting pressure on the Russian side. However, there are still more Russian soldiers than Ukrainian at the moment. We have to keep the context in mind when we're talking about Ukraine because we don't see what's happening on the other end. Russia has years and years of practice keeping its information and about losses secret. Russian men aged between 18 and 30 are eligible to be drafted for a year. They draft every year also, regardless of what's going on in the war. At present, conscripts are supposed to be legally exempt from combat if they do not have at least 4 months of training. He says this is not happening in practice. That said, we're seeing Russia don't need to have another conscription because they've released massive amounts of sums of money to try and entice volunteers onto the front line, which can be then a lot more enticing than someone knocking on your door going, you come with me, or dragging someone out of a theatre. And of course, that will have then more effect on and rolled on to morale and psychological aspect at the front line of actually being a volunteer for an amount of time. And that money, people forget. People go, oh, it's 20,000, 30,000 USD. You forget the purchase pay parity between that money and Russia. Russian soldiers at the moment are paid better than I was in Afghan. I know it's a hell of a lot different war. The chance of dying at 50 times that. But I think a lot of these Russians, particularly young guys or even dads, be looking going, that is actually amount of like generational wealth there. It's huge. It could set their family up. Now, whether this money's being paid on or not, that is also another problem that is starting. Since the war started, Russian courts have tried some 8,000 cases of violations involving military personnel, more than 80% being desertions. Earlier this year, however, Ukrainian military intelligence reported that 18,000 soldiers in Russia's southern military district had deserted. So even from Ukraine's figures, still isn't as much as what we're seeing in Ukraine. The main reasons some give a fear of getting wounded or worse, dying. Yes, that's the main fear in war. In a war that has no end in sight. But in May, at least 500,000 Russian soldiers had either died or been wounded since the war began, according to the UK's Ministry of Defence, where they say it's 500,000 either died or wounded, where Ukraine's ministry is saying 600,000 killed, nearly, well then we would translate that to about then 2 million dying. So again, this is the informational problem that we have. Ask questions. It's not illegal to ever ask a question. Anyway, legends, thank you for all the support as always. I really, really appreciate it. And if all goes wrong, it's very, very unlikely, but if all goes wrong, thank you for spending some time with me. Thank you for supporting me on everything that I've done, listening to me, disagreeing with me, agreeing with me. I really appreciate it. Anyway, there's links below if you'd like to support me on this next step that we are running headfirst into. Legends, look after yourself, and I'll speak to you. Oh shit, I'm not going to speak to you tomorrow. I'll speak to you when I speak to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.